Have you ever met someone at the exact moment you stopped believing in love? She wasn't looking for romance. He wasn't trying to be anyone's savior, but a booking mistake at a remote Hawaiian resort forced them to share the same room, as strangers pretending to be husband and wife. No promises, no plans, just one room, one ocean view, and two broken hearts learning how to feel again. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a story about timing, vulnerability, and the kind of love that doesn't need a label to be real. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and let us know in the comments. Where are you listening from? Your like helps this channel grow and continue bringing emotional stories like this one. Share it with someone special. The moment the plane lifted off the tarmac, Olivia expected to feel relief. But what she felt instead was nothing. A hollow ache settled deep in her chest, like fog rolling in from the sea, thick and unrelenting. It wasn't the kind of pain that cried out. It was quieter than that. It simply existed, expanding inside her ribs, filling the space where certainty used to live. Seattle was behind her now. The skyline that once made her heart swell with pride had become unbearable. It wasn't the city's fault, it was the memories. The shared apartment on 3rd Avenue, the indie bookstore with handwritten staff reviews on the shelves, the Thai place they ordered from every Sunday night. They had all been hers and Thomas's. 5 years of routines, rituals, and quiet promises, wrapped in candlelight and silence, all erased with a single sentence. I don't know if I love you anymore. No shouting, no betrayal, no dramatic exit. Just that sentence, spoken softly between bites of mushroom risotto, his eyes avoiding hers as if looking at her might make the truth crumble. And maybe that would have been easier if it had been messy, loud, chaotic. But it wasn't. It was still, like a heart that had stopped beating and hadn't noticed yet. In the days that followed, Olivia moved through her life like a sleepwalker. She packed her bags in silence, ignoring the texts from friends that lit up her phone screen like flashes of a life she no longer belonged to. Her inbox filled with, "Are you okay?" and "I'm here for you," but she didn't know how to respond. How could she explain that it wasn't just Thomas she had lost, but something much deeper? Herself, perhaps. She didn't plan the trip, not really. It was 2:37 a.m., and the silence in her apartment was loud, so loud she couldn't breathe. She opened her laptop and typed, "Quiet resorts far from Seattle." No filters, no reviews, just instinct and desperation. She clicked on the first option that made her heart skip. A hidden gem in Hana, Hawaii. Ocean views, minimalist villas, no family packages, no group tours, just space. She booked it without thinking. A week, one room, one escape. Her credit card trembled at the purchase, but for the first time in days, she didn't care about consequences. She wasn't running from heartbreak, she told herself. She was chasing air, solitude, a place where her pain wouldn't echo off the walls every time she exhaled. When the day of departure arrived, Olivia sat by the airport gate in oversized sunglasses, gripping a paperback she wasn't reading. Around her, couples leaned into each other. Children laughed. Flight attendants moved with brisk, efficient energy. She felt like a misplaced object, something that didn't belong in this scene. When they called her boarding group, she stood. Shoulders tight, eyes glassy. The flight was long. Hours passed in a fog. The sky shifted from steel grey to soft gold as they approached the islands. Looking out the window, she saw ribbons of coastline curling into the Pacific like whispers. And for a moment, just one fleeting second, her chest didn't feel so heavy. At the arrival gate, the air wrapped around her like a warm shawl, humid, floral, alive. She blinked against the sunlight. It stung, but it was real. A young man held a sign that read, "Mr. and Mrs. Walker, room 508. Her breath caught. "I'm Olivia Walker," she said hesitantly. "But I'm not married." The driver grinned, unfazed. Probably a glitch in the system. It happens, no worries." She could have corrected him, demanded he fix it, but the thought of explaining herself, again, was exhausting. She let it go. For the first time in weeks, the silence felt like choice instead of punishment. The drive to the resort was hypnotic. Lush greens blurred past her window, palm trees bending in a gentle breeze. waterfalls spilling down cliffs like nature weeping for her. She rolled the window down and closed her eyes. The scent of salt and hibiscus hit her like a lullaby. When they arrived, she paused before getting out of the car. The resort was more beautiful than she had imagined, not in a grand, opulent way, but in the way simplicity can be breathtaking. White stucco walls kissed by the sun, pools that shimmered like sheets of glass, wooden walkways lined with torches that flickered even in daylight. At the front desk, a woman greeted her with the ease of someone used to newlyweds. "Welcome, Mrs. Walker. We're so glad you've chosen to spend your honeymoon with us. Room 508 is ready and waiting." Olivia hesitated. "Actually, there's a mistake. I'm not..." But the receptionist was already checking the system. "Oh, I see. Unfortunately, we are fully booked this week, wedding season. But don't worry. Our manager will look into it first thing tomorrow morning. In the meantime, please feel free to enjoy the room and the amenities." The keycard was handed to her gently, as if refusing it would offend the resort itself. She took it with a nod, too emotionally drained to protest. Room 508. The hallway was quiet. Tropical birds called out in the distance, and every step she took echoed louder than her thoughts. Her hand trembled as she slid the card into the lock. The door clicked, and what she saw made her freeze. A man was sitting on the edge of the bed, shirt unbuttoned just enough to suggest heat, not arrogance. His skin was sun-warmed, his posture casual, and his eyes locked onto hers like they'd met before. "You must be my wife," he said, with a dry smile. Her mouth fell open. "Excuse me." He stood, brushing off invisible dust from his linen pants. "Don't panic. I'm not a murderer or some kind of honeymoon crasher. Apparently the hotel thinks we're married, and judging by your expression, you didn't get the memo either." She wanted to walk out, slam the door, scream, but her body refused to move. He raised both hands in surrender. "I'll sleep outside if you want, or on the couch. Just don't stab me." She should have laughed, or at least glared, but something about him, his ease, his presence, didn't feel dangerous. It felt oddly familiar, like a story she hadn't written but had somehow lived before. She stepped inside, closed the door. The sound of it clicking shut behind her felt final, and yet, strangely, like a beginning. And what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Room 508 wasn't just a glitch in a booking system. It was fate, disguised as a mistake. The air inside Room 508 was heavier than Olivia expected, thick with ocean salt, and the faint scent of sandalwood, possibly from the essential oil diffuser humming softly near the window. But none of that compared to the presence of the man standing in front of her. He was barefoot, that was the first thing she noticed. His feet, relaxed on the cool wooden floor, grounded him like someone who had nothing to hide and nowhere to go. He wasn't tall, not imposing, but carried himself with a quiet confidence that filled the space. His hair was dark, slightly tousled, like he had just run his fingers through it in frustration, or perhaps amusement. "I'm Liam," he said simply, as if that explained everything. "Liam Bennett." The name didn't ring any bells. She didn't respond. He tilted his head. "And you must be Olivia Walker, right? My accidental bride for the week?" Her arms folded instinctively. "This isn't funny." "No, it's definitely not," he agreed, though his tone still carried the trace of a smirk. "Believe me, I was just as confused when they handed me the room key and said, 'Your wife will be arriving shortly.' Thought maybe I got married last night and blacked out." She sighed sharply. "I don't have the energy for this." "Fair enough," he said, stepping aside and motioning toward the bedroom. "It's all yours. I'll crash out here." Out here, as in the living room area, which featured a wide, cream-colored couch, 2 woven chairs, and a small table, with fresh guava and a complimentary bottle of champagne labeled "For the Happy Couple." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "I'm calling the front desk," she muttered, pulling out her phone. Liam raised an eyebrow. "Already tried. They were very apologetic and very useless, full capacity, no other rooms available. But hey, they promised to look into it by tomorrow morning, whatever that means." Olivia stared at him, frustration rising. She hadn't flown across the ocean to share a room with a stranger. No matter how calm his voice sounded, or how annoyingly symmetrical his face was. And yet, part of her didn't want to make a scene. Not again. Not tonight. She rubbed her temples. This is absurd. Agreed, but it's also real, so maybe temporary truce. He walked over to the minibar, pulled out 2 glasses and popped the champagne with a quiet hiss. The cork hit the ceiling. Olivia flinched. "Sorry," he said, unfazed. "Celebrating our non-existent wedding. Care for a toast to miscommunication and online booking errors?" She didn't respond. But after a long pause, she took the glass. He offered. Liam raised his own. To fake marriages and real awkwardness. She clinked hers against his with the barest sound, then sipped, slowly. For a while they sat in silence. The sunset filtered through the sheer curtains, casting golden threads across the floor. Olivia leaned back against the armrest of the couch, champagne glass in hand, wondering how her life had twisted itself into this moment. Liam broke the silence. "So, what's your story, Olivia Walker? Who runs away to Hawaii under someone else's name and ends up booked in a honeymoon? Sweet with a stranger?" She looked at him sharply. "I didn't run away." He raised both hands. "Didn't say you did, just curious." She hesitated. The usual instinct kicked in. To dodge. To keep things superficial. But then again, this man didn't know her, and maybe that was the only reason she felt safe enough to speak. "My fiancé, ex, left me 3 weeks ago," she said quietly. No drama, no warning. Just said he wasn't sure if he felt the same anymore, so I left. There it was, out loud, and it didn't shatter her, just hung in the air like a truth waiting to be accepted. Liam's gaze softened. "That's brutal." She nodded. He took another sip, then leaned his head back on the couch. "For what it's worth, I wasn't supposed to be here either." Olivia glanced at him. "No?" "No. My buddy was supposed to get married last week. Destination wedding. Hana. Was the honeymoon spot. They cancelled the whole thing, long story, but I guess the room was non-refundable and I needed a break from LA, so..." He shrugged. "Here I am, sitting in paradise, drinking champagne with a woman who clearly hates me." She huffed, not quite a laugh, not quite anger either. "I don't hate you. Progress," he said, smiling. They both fell quiet again. Outside, the sky shifted from gold to indigo. Waves lapped against the rocks below, steady and soothing. Olivia's pulse began to slow, her hands unclenched. "What do we do until tomorrow?" she asked softly. Liam looked at her with amusement. "We fake it, just for tonight. No awkwardness, no weird tension. You take the bed, I take the couch. We act like we planned this disaster together. No pressure, no past." "And what happens if people ask?" He grinned. "We lie." She narrowed her eyes. "Lightly," he added. "Nothing dramatic. Just enough to get through one night without looking like escaped convicts. I mean, the champagne's already chilled. Might as well make use of it." It was reckless, silly, slightly insane. But for reasons she couldn't explain, the idea of pretending just for one night felt easier than fighting. And maybe there was something liberating in not being herself for a moment, not the woman who got left behind, not the one who had to explain or justify anything. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Okay, one night," she said. "One night," he echoed, raising his glass again. And as their glasses touched for a second time, something shifted in the room, not dramatic, not sudden, just a quiet, nearly invisible change in the air between 2 strangers pretending not to care. They were no longer just 2 people caught in a booking error. They were 2 people, broken and brave in their own ways, learning how to share silence, and neither of them knew just how much that silence would change them. The morning light in room 508 was unapologetically bright. It poured through the linen curtains without hesitation, spilling across the floor in golden streaks and landing directly on Olivia's face. She stirred, eyes fluttering open with the heaviness of someone who hadn't truly slept, but hadn't quite stayed awake either. For a moment she forgot where she was. The unfamiliar ceiling, the faint scent of ocean air and wood polish, the softness of the sheets that didn't belong to her. Then she heard it, a soft clink of glass against ceramic. She turned her head slowly. Liam was in the kitchenette, barefoot again, shirtless this time, wearing navy linen pajama pants and preparing coffee like he belonged there. His hair was messier than before, and his movements calm, rhythmic. There was no sense of urgency, just presence. "I made enough for two," he said without turning around. She sat up, brushing strands of hair out of her face. "You're still here." He glanced over his shoulder, a grin tugging at the edge of his mouth. "Where else would I go? They still haven't fixed the booking." She frowned. "You called?" "Right after sunrise, same answer. They're working on it, whatever that means." She exhaled sharply. The absurdity of it all might have been funny if it weren't happening to her. "This can't keep happening. They need to move one of us." He poured the coffee and handed her a mug. "They said maybe by tonight. A wedding party just checked in. Every room is full." Olivia wrapped her hands around the mug, inhaling the scent, before taking a cautious sip. It was surprisingly perfect, strong, with a hint of cinnamon. She looked at him. "You brought cinnamon?" He shrugged. "I traveled prepared." She tried not to smile. Failed. "So what now? We just cohabitate?" Liam leaned against the counter, arms crossed over his bare chest. "That's the proposal." Her brows lifted. "Excuse me." He raised both hands, mock serious. "Temporary cohabitation. 1 day, maybe 2. We set rules, boundaries, we split the space. Think of it like a peace treaty." Olivia narrowed her eyes. "This isn't some quirky rom-com, Liam." "No," he agreed. "But it doesn't have to be a war zone either." There was a pause. She looked at the space around her, the minimalist charm of the villa, the view of the ocean from the balcony, the bouquet of hibiscus on the dresser still fresh from yesterday. She had come here for peace, not conflict, and Liam, for all his sarcasm and maddening calm, didn't seem interested in causing chaos. She set the mug down. "Rules, non-negotiable." Liam nodded. "Lay them on me. No touching. Fair. No weird conversations about feelings. Even better, no inviting strangers over, no snooping, no loud phone calls. Are you always this intense in the morning? Don't test me, Bennett." He raised a hand to his chest, pretending to be wounded. "Understood. No snooping, no strangers, no emotions." "Got it." She stared at him. "And you sleep on the couch?" "Fine by me. That bed is dangerously soft. I don't trust it." They stood in silence for a beat. Then she extended her hand slowly. "Temporary truce." He took it. His grip was warm, firm, and lingered just a second longer than necessary. "Temporary," she repeated, pulling her hand back. The rest of the morning passed in an odd rhythm, like two dancers learning the steps without music. They moved around each other with cautious coordination. She took the bedroom to change. He took the balcony for work calls. At noon, they sat, on opposite ends of the couch, eating fruit and toasted bread, speaking only when necessary. But despite the distance, the silence between them wasn't sharp. It was soft. Later that afternoon, they walked the length of the resort together, not because they planned it, but because they both wanted out of the room at the same time. The sky was a perfect blend of blue and gold, and the scent of coconut oil drifted on the breeze from the nearby pool. They strolled quietly, passing honeymooners and giggling children, families gathering for sunset cocktails, staff preparing lanterns for evening. Liam pointed out a couple taking selfies near the cliffs. "That'll be us soon," he joked. "I'll lift you like that scene from The Notebook." Olivia rolled her eyes. "You're insufferable. And yet you're still here." She didn't respond, but she didn't walk away either. That evening, back in the villa, the hotel called again. Still no solution. They apologized profusely and offered a complimentary massage for the inconvenience. Olivia accepted it. Liam, of course, tried to upgrade it to a couple's massage just to make her uncomfortable. She declined, with a death stare. Night fell slowly. The sky turned from soft amber to deep violet. The resort lights flickered on, casting golden pools across the pathways. Inside room 508, There was a surprising peace. Olivia curled up on the bed with a book she wasn't reading. Liam sat by the window, sketching something in a small black notebook. She hadn't expected him to be the type to sketch, or to drink tea after dinner, or to let silence exist without needing to fill it. Eventually, she closed her book. "Why aren't you freaking out?" He looked up, confused. "About what?" "This, all of this, sharing space with a stranger, missing your own plans, sleeping." "On a couch." Liam tilted his head. "Maybe I like unpredictable things." She scoffed. "No one likes unpredictability. They just get used to it." He smiled softly this time. "Then maybe I'm used to it." There was something in his voice that made her pause. Not flirtation, not charm, something quieter, like a bruise not yet touched. She didn't ask questions, she didn't push, but something in her chest tightened. As she turned off the bedside lamp and pulled the covers over herself, she whispered into the dark, "Just one more night." From the couch, his voice drifted back gently. "Sure, Olivia, just one." But neither of them really believed that anymore. The restaurant overlooked the ocean like it had been carved directly into the edge of the earth. Built from reclaimed wood and smooth stone, it shimmered under soft lanterns that swayed gently in the breeze. Tables were spaced generously apart, with flowing white curtains fluttering around them like whispers. A live musician plucked a slow melody on a ukulele near the corner, blending into the sounds of waves and quiet laughter. Olivia wasn't planning on having dinner there. Not with Liam, not dressed in a soft olive dress she hadn't worn in over a year. But when the resort receptionist casually mentioned that Mr. and Mrs. Walker had a complimentary romantic dinner booked for that evening as part of their honeymoon experience, Liam had pounced on the opportunity before she could protest. "You don't say," he had grinned, spinning the reservation card in his fingers like a magician with a coin. "8 o'clock? Ocean view? Feels rude not to show up." And somehow she said yes. Not because she wanted the romance. Not because she believed in it, but because it was easier than sitting across from him in silence again, eating room service on opposite sides of the couch. Now, seated at the table, candlelight flickering between them, Olivia felt like she was inside a dream she hadn't asked. For Liam wore a white linen shirt, sleeves rolled, a few buttons undone. He looked annoyingly relaxed, as if they weren't two strangers pretending to be a couple in a place designed for people deeply in love. A server appeared with 2 glasses of rosé and a smile that made Olivia immediately feel exposed. "Compliments of the house for the newlyweds." Olivia opened her mouth to correct her, but Liam beat her to it, raising his glass and offering a warm, convincing smile. "Thank you. It's a lovely gesture." The server left. Olivia narrowed her eyes. "You didn't have to play along." "Didn't I?" he countered. "Free wine, ocean view, no one questioning why we're here. Feels like the smarter option." She sipped cautiously. The wine was chilled, floral, almost too easy to drink. "So," Liam said after a moment, "tell me one completely useless fact about yourself." She blinked. "What?" "You heard me. No heavy stories, no trauma dumps, just something light, silly." She hesitated, lips pursed. After a beat, "I still sleep with socks on, even in the summer." Liam laughed, full and unguarded. "That's a red flag. Says the man who packs cinnamon for vacations. I'm a man of refined taste." "You're a walking contradiction. Glad you're catching up." And just like that, the tension between them loosened. They talked, not about pasts or pain or anything that could break the spell. They talked about books that disappointed them, about dream cities they'd never visited, about how resort coffee is always weirdly better than expected. At one point, Olivia laughed so hard she had to put her fork down. Liam just watched her with a look that made her stomach twist, but not in a bad way. Dinner came and went in waves. Grilled fish with citrus glaze, roasted vegetables, coconut rice. Each dish arrived with the subtle theatrics of fine dining, but neither of them noticed. They were too caught in the ease of pretending. Pretending to be two people who had chosen each other. Pretending that they weren't broken in their own ways. Pretending that the world outside this island didn't exist. As the final course, mango mousse with passion fruit drizzle, was served, Liam leaned back, his gaze quiet. "You know," he said, I've had real dates that felt more fake than this. Olivia didn't answer right away. The candlelight danced across his face, softening the sharp lines of his jaw, highlighting the kindness in his eyes that he tried too hard to mask with sarcasm. "It's because there's no pressure here," she said finally. "No stakes, no future. Just this." "Exactly," he agreed, "and somehow that makes it feel more honest." She looked away, the ocean breeze brushing her cheek. A moment passed, maybe two. Then he added quieter, "Do you think that's sad?" She thought about it. "No. I think it's human." They sat in silence after that, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Around them, couples leaned into each other, whispered secrets, toasted to beginnings. Olivia looked at them and wondered how many of those people were truly in love, and how many were just trying to be. When they left the restaurant, the path was lit by paper lanterns swaying from tree branches. The sky above was velvet, littered, with stars that looked close enough to touch. Liam offered her his arm without speaking. She took it without thinking. Back at room 508, neither of them moved to turn on the lights. The door closed softly behind them. For a second, the silence between them was louder than anything they had shared at dinner. Olivia walked toward the window, pulled the curtain back. The moonlight glowed on the ocean like silver spilled across the surface. "I don't want to think tonight," she whispered. Liam, still by the door, nodded. "Then don't." She turned, met his eyes, and for the first time there was no need for rules, no pretending, no lies. Just two people, tired, lonely, quietly brave, staring at something that felt like possibility. She didn't know what would happen next, didn't want to, but something inside her, something that had been asleep for weeks, had finally begun to stir. The next morning didn't begin with tension. It began with warmth. Sunlight filtered through the gauzy curtains, dancing across Olivia's bare shoulders as she sat curled up on the bed with a mug of coffee in hand. Strong, dark, perfectly, brewed by the man humming softly in the kitchen. Liam was making breakfast. He wasn't a particularly elegant cook. He moved with the confidence of someone who relied on instinct rather than recipes. But the scent of toasted coconut and eggs was enough to coax Olivia from sleep before she even opened her eyes. She hadn't meant to fall into a rhythm with him, but somehow, without either of them acknowledging it, they had begun to orbit each other with a kind of unspoken coordination. By day 3, their shared space no longer felt accidental. It felt oddly comfortable. They didn't ask for schedules, they simply adapted. Olivia preferred mornings on the balcony with her journal. Liam took that time to swim laps in the quiet pool before the resort came to life. Midday walks to the cove became habitual. Evening drinks turned into an unspoken ritual. There were no rules anymore, only patterns, and in those patterns something subtle took root. Liam started bringing her small things without ceremony. A chilled bottle of mango juice after a hot walk, a paperback he found at the resort's reading lounge, a silk hair tie she didn't realize she had dropped on the patio. He didn't make a show of it. He just placed them beside her and walked away, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Olivia, in return, started laughing again. Not the polite chuckles she offered acquaintances, but deep, unguarded laughter that came from somewhere forgotten. She didn't analyze why. She didn't ask herself if it was temporary. She just let it come, let it fill the space between them like light spilling into a dark room. They told stories. Not the tragic kind. Those still lived beneath the surface, waiting, but the kind that revealed small truths. Liam shared his obsession with maps and how he used to draw fake treasure islands as a kid. Olivia confessed that she once rewrote the endings of novels she didn't like and tucked the pages back inside the books. He called her a literary rebel. She called him a pirate without a ship. Somehow these little things mattered more than declarations ever could. One afternoon they sat in the sand near the rocks, watching crabs scurry and the tide crawl back toward the horizon. Liam skipped stones. Olivia buried her feet in the warm grains, eyes distant. "Did you always want to be an editor?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Since I was 12, I used to correct my teacher's grammar. They didn't love that." He laughed, then asked, "And do you still love it now?" She paused. Some days, yes, some days, and it just feels like I'm fixing other people's stories because I don't know how to write my own. There it was, an admission that surprised even her. Liam didn't press. He just looked at her, and in his silence she felt understood. That evening they cooked dinner together in the villa, something simple, improvised. Liam handled the stovetop, while Olivia chopped vegetables with more focus than necessary. Music played softly from a phone speaker, and at one point, without planning it, they ended up dancing barefoot near the stove. Not real dancing, just a slow, swaying motion that was more about presence than rhythm. He twirled her once, clumsily. She laughed, the sound muffled by the weight of something that felt suspiciously like happiness. Later on the balcony, Olivia rested her head on Liam's shoulder. Neither of them spoke. The ocean whispered beneath them, and 1,000 stars blinked overhead. She closed her eyes and listened to the quiet beat of his breath. It didn't feel like pretending anymore. It felt like home, and yet beneath the softness she could feel the edge of something sharp, the growing awareness that what they were building, this fragile, beautiful thing, had no foundation outside of these walls. No future waiting neatly outlined. Just now, just the moment. And that terrified her more than she cared to admit. It was just past midnight when they wandered down to the beach. The resort had quieted into a gentle hush, its soft lighting casting halos around palm trees and empty lounge chairs. The only sounds were the steady rhythm of waves rolling in and the whisper of the wind stirring the dunes. Olivia held her sandals in one hand, letting the cool sand mold beneath her bare feet. Her dress fluttered lightly at her knees, damp with sea mist. Liam walked beside her in silence, carrying 2 bottles of water and the invisible weight of something he hadn't said yet. They reached a flat stretch of sand near the rocks and sat down, close enough to feel the warmth of each other's skin, but not quite touching. For a while neither spoke. The moon floated high above the ocean, pale and unbothered. The tide reached for their toes and receded in shy pulses, like the sea itself was listening. Olivia traced circles in the sand beside her knee. "Do you ever feel like the silence gets louder at night?" she asked, not quite looking at him. Liam responded after a long pause. "Only when I'm avoiding something." She smiled faintly. "Then it must be deafening for both of us." A gust of wind carried the scent of salt and something sweet, maybe the plumeria from the resort gardens. Olivia inhaled it deeply, grounding herself before saying what she hadn't yet admitted aloud. "I kept trying to figure out when it started dying," she said, voice soft. "My last relationship. I looked for signs, traced memories backward like some emotional autopsy, and the worst part? I still don't know. It just faded, quietly." She looked at him then, expecting indifference or maybe polite discomfort. But his eyes were steady. No judgment. No rush to fill the silence that followed. He nodded slowly. "That's how it ends sometimes. Not with a bang, but with indifference. Like a light bulb that flickers out while you're still in the room, not noticing until it's too dark to read." Olivia blinked. "Exactly." Liam took a breath, the kind that gathered courage from deep inside the ribs. "My ex-wife cheated. On me," he said. "With my best friend. 2 years of pretending everything was fine I found out through a stupid text message, meant for him, not me." The confession hung between them like a sudden crack in the night. "I didn't scream," he added. "Didn't throw anything, I just walked out, packed a single bag, haven't seen either of them since." Olivia's fingers stilled in the sand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shook his head. "Don't be. It taught me that you can't control how people hurt you, only how long you let the wound bleed." She studied him, noticing for the first time how tired he looked beneath the ease and charm, like someone who carried his pain in neatly folded compartments, hidden behind smiles and sarcastic remarks. They both turned their eyes toward the water. "I thought healing would feel like a grand victory," Olivia murmured. "But it's more like learning to live with an echo." "Maybe it's not about silencing the echo," Liam said quietly. "Maybe it's about changing what it says." Her eyes met his again, and for a moment, the rawness between them wasn't frightening. It was intimate, sacred. They sat like that for a long time, two souls tangled in moonlight, no longer strangers, not yet anything else, just present. Eventually, Olivia leaned her head gently against his shoulder. No words, no promises, just shared silence. And as the tide inched closer once again, neither of them moved, because for the first time in a long time the silence didn't feel like something to fill, it felt like something to keep. The sun was setting when they arrived at the quiet restaurant outside the resort, one that Olivia had noticed on her first day, but hadn't dared to explore alone. It wasn't grand, just a small cliffside space with wooden tables, string lights, and an open view of the horizon, where the sky melted from gold into lavender. The kind of place where people didn't speak loudly because nature was already saying everything. Liam pulled out her chair without ceremony, then took the seat across from her, his expression unreadable under the soft orange hue of the fading day. They ordered without fuss, a bottle of white wine, fresh seafood, bread warm from the oven. The conversation for once wasn't filled with banter or distraction. It was still, intentional. Every word carried the weight of everything unsaid. Olivia's dress was simple, black, tied at the waist, but something in the way Liam looked at her made her feel like the most striking woman in the room. He didn't say anything about it. He didn't need to. And she noticed him too, how his sleeves were rolled up, forearms tanned and strong, a few days of stubble softening his jaw. He looked like the version of a man who had stopped running, at least for now. Halfway through dinner, Liam set his fork down and leaned forward. "What happens when we leave this place?" he asked. Her stomach tightened. She looked down at her plate. "I don't know." He waited for her to continue. "I didn't come here to find anything. I came to forget, to disappear for a while." Liam nodded slowly. "Me too." They finished the meal in silence. Not cold silence, but the kind that hummed with questions neither of them were ready to answer. Afterward, they walked back to the villa under a sky soaked in stars. The path was lit by soft ground lanterns, casting golden pools of light along the way. Their hands brushed once, then again. And on the third time, Olivia didn't pull hers away. At the door of room 508, she paused, turning the key slowly before opening it. The room smelled like the sea, clean, warm, familiar now. She stepped inside. So did Liam. She didn't turn on the lights. The moonlight streaming through the curtains was enough. When she turned to face him, he was already watching her. Not with hunger, not with impatience, but with that same quiet intensity she'd begun to crave, like he was seeing through the layers she worked so hard to hold in place. "I don't want this to be a mistake," she said softly. Liam stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of his chest. "Then don't make it one." It wasn't a line, it wasn't a seduction, it was a choice. She reached up, her fingers brushing his jaw, and he leaned in, not too fast, not too slow, until their foreheads touched. A breath passed between them, then another. And then they kissed. It wasn't desperate or rushed. It was steady, deep. A kiss that asked, "Are you here with me?" and answered, "Yes." He pulled her closer. Her hands slid beneath his shirt, feeling the curve of muscle, the warmth of skin. He kissed her like they had all the time in the world, like nothing existed outside those four walls. Clothes were removed with unspoken care, like they were unpacking something fragile. She traced the line of his shoulder with her fingertips. He kissed the inside of her wrist. They moved together like waves, soft, sure, inevitable. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing presence, choosing each other. When they lay tangled in the sheets afterward, breath slowing, limbs entwined, Olivia didn't feel lost. She felt found. But she didn't speak. Neither did he. Because even then, especially then, they both knew that what had just happened didn't solve anything. It didn't promise a future. It didn't fix the brokenness they carried. But for that night they let go. Of fear. Of timelines. Of who they were supposed to be. They simply existed in each other's arms, in the stillness after the storm. And as the moon traced its arc across the sky, Olivia's eyes stayed open, watching the man beside her, not with certainty, but with something quieter. Something that looked suspiciously like hope. The bed was cold when Olivia reached for him. Her fingers grazed only sheets, creased empty, and already losing the warmth of the body that had lain beside her just hours before. The early morning light seeped in through the curtains, pale and indifferent, washing the room in a silvery grey. She sat up slowly, instinctively wrapping the sheets around herself. Her heart beat faster, but she wasn't sure if it was anxiety or simple confusion. Liam? No answer. She padded to the bathroom. Empty. The balcony. Empty. His shoes were gone. His duffel bag, too. The coffee machine sat untouched, the mugs from the night before still on the counter. The silence in room 508 had shifted. It was no longer comforting, it was hollow. Final. She found a slip of paper on the table, but it was just a receipt from the restaurant. Nothing written, no note, no explanation, no goodbye. Her stomach twisted. He left, and he hadn't even said her name. She stood frozen in the center of the room, the image of his hand in hers, of his breath on her skin, of his voice, low, steady, grounding, suddenly distant. She could still hear it, like an echo, but now it rang false. Or maybe unfinished. By the time she reached the front desk, she already knew the answer. Yes, Miss Walker, the concierge confirmed. Mr. Bennett checked out early this morning, said it was a personal emergency. He left for the airport. Would you like us to call a car for you as well? She shook her head, lips pressed into a line. No, thank you. But the thank you burned on her tongue. She didn't cry right away. Instead, she walked back to the villa in silence, passing the pool where they'd once laughed, the cove where they'd watched the sunset, the gardens where they'd shared stories, that now felt fragile, stolen. Back inside room 508, she picked up his empty glass, still on the windowsill where he'd left it the night before. For a second, she held it to her lips, not knowing why. Then she set it down, and finally, let the tears come, not because he left, but because he'd made her believe he wouldn't. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to erase everything, to undo every shared glance, every whispered moment that now felt like a lie. But the truth was, Liam hadn't promised anything, not really, and maybe that's what hurt most. For the rest of the day, Olivia didn't leave the room. She didn't answer messages, didn't order food. The villa was still beautiful, the view still stunning, but everything felt off-center, like a frame knocked askew on a perfect wall. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe something urgent had come up. Maybe he had a reason. Maybe he meant to reach out later. But none of those maybes erased the feeling in her chest, a quiet shattering. As night fell, she stood by the glass doors, watching the stars come out one by one. Somewhere out there Liam was gone, back to LA, back to silence, and she had no idea if he'd ever look back. She whispered into the dark, not expecting an answer. Why did you run? No response, just the sea, just the wind, and the ghost of a man who had made her feel whole, only to vanish before dawn. Olivia didn't leave Hana the next day. She could have. Every fiber of logic told her to pack her things, board the next flight back to Seattle, and file room 508 under temporary illusion. But something in her refused to move, not out of hope, out of exhaustion. She spent the next few days in a quiet rhythm of solitude. No longer sharing space with Liam, the villa felt larger, quieter, too quiet. She woke late, took long walks without a destination, ate alone, sometimes forgetting to eat at all. She journaled sporadically, mostly fragments, phrases, half-sentences. Why do people who understand our silences always leave? Was it real if he never said goodbye? Am I mourning the man or the moment? By the third day, she stopped asking. And on the fourth, she turned her phone back on. Dozens of notifications, missed calls from friends, messages from colleagues, but none from Liam, until she reached the very last one. It was simple. Liam, can I explain? Her breath caught. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Every instinct screamed for self-protection. She didn't owe him anything, not a second chance, not a response. Not after what he'd done, vanishing without a word, leaving her in a city of strangers with a room full of memories. And yet, her heart didn't beat like someone ready to let go. It beat like someone afraid of repeating the same abandonment again, this time by her own choice. She stared at the screen for nearly an hour before typing a single sentence. Olivia, if you explain, don't edit. No metaphors, no stories, just the truth. The reply came quickly. Too quickly. Liam, I left because I felt something. Real. And I panicked. I've never trusted that feeling since it burned me. I didn't want to ruin it. Or worse, let it ruin me. She read it again. And again. Then closed her eyes. It wasn't the grand gesture part of her might have expected. There were no flowers, no sudden arrival, no poetic apologies, just honesty, raw and flawed. And maybe that was the first time Liam had really shown her who he was. The following day, she walked to the cove where they used to sit. The tide was low. The rocks were exposed like wounds left by the sea. She stood there for a long time, staring at the horizon, not waiting for him, waiting for clarity. Did his explanation change what he had done? No. Did it make her pain vanish? No. But it gave it shape, context, humanity. And sometimes, that's all we need to begin letting something go, or letting something in. That night, as she folded the hotel robe for the last time and set her suitcase by the door, she found a postcard tucked under her door. It wasn't from the resort. The handwriting was unmistakable, just 2 words. Room 508. And beneath it, smaller. Still waiting. Her hand trembled slightly as she held it. He hadn't closed the door. He had left it ajar. Just enough for her to choose. And in that fragile space between fear and forgiveness, Olivia felt something return, not certainty, but permission to decide. The plane touched down in Maui with a soft jolt. Olivia hadn't booked a return flight until that postcard arrived. She'd stared at it for 2 days, turning it over in her hands like it held some kind of hidden code. Still waiting, he had written, but what exactly was he waiting for? Her forgiveness, her faith, a chance to start over. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe he didn't either. But something in her knew she had to go back, not to chase answers, but to see if what they had shared had truly ended, or simply paused. The taxi ride to Hana was quiet. The roads twisted along the cliffs just as before, but everything looked different now. The ocean no longer felt like an escape. It felt like a witness. The resort appeared exactly as she had left it. The white walls kissed by light, the scent of orchids in the air, the gentle rustle of palm trees. At the reception, she didn't have to say a word. The woman behind the desk gave a knowing smile and handed her the keycard without a question. Room 508. The hallway felt longer this time. Her footsteps were measured, not hesitant but cautious. The kind of caution that only exists after a fall. She stopped at the door. Her hand hovered over the handle. For a moment she just breathed. And then she opened it. Liam was there, sitting on the same couch in the same linen shirt, eyes resting on the same view that had once wrapped them both in silence. When he looked up, he didn't smile, didn't speak. He just stood, slowly, like something sacred was unfolding between them. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her. The silence was immediate, but not empty. It was full of everything they didn't need to say, full of memory, of weight, of unfinished sentences. He reached for her hand gently. No urgency, no desperation, just presence. His fingers wrapped around hers with a familiar heat. "I didn't know if you'd come," he said, voice low. "I almost didn't," she replied honestly. They stood there, just looking at each other. Her eyes scanned his face, not looking for guilt, not looking for excuses, but for truth. And she found it, in the softness of his mouth, in the way he didn't let go. "I was afraid," he murmured, "of what this meant, of how real it felt." "I was afraid too," she said, "that it only felt real to me." He took a breath, and when he spoke again, it wasn't a plea. It was a confession. But I couldn't stop thinking about you, about us, not the resort, not the escape, just you. Her chest rose and fell, a slow, steady rhythm. I don't need promises, Liam, she said quietly. I just need honesty and presence, one day at a time. He nodded, pulling her closer, not forcefully, but as if the distance between them no longer made sense. And in that embrace, Olivia felt something return. Not certainty, not happily ever after, but alignment. Like two people meeting in the exact place they both needed to be, without a map, without a script, without the need to name it. That night they didn't rush into each other's arms, they simply shared the space, cooked together, laughed, again, sat barefoot on the balcony listening to the waves, and when they lay down in bed side by side, no one said, I love you or we're back. They didn't need to, because in that quiet shared breath before sleep, they were no longer pretending. They were choosing. The next morning, the sun rose gently, painting the sky in soft pastels, as if even the day itself was hesitant to disturb the stillness inside room 508. Olivia opened her eyes slowly. Liam was already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching. Her, not staring, not searching, just witnessing. As if to say, I'm here, you're real, we're still here. There was no rush to speak, no pressure to define, and that in itself felt like a choice. They made coffee together in silence, moving through the kitchen like two people who had learned the rhythm of one another without even realizing it. She handed him the cream before, he asked. He poured her cup to the line she preferred, small gestures that said, I see you. Later they sat on the patio, barefoot, two mugs between them, and the ocean stretching into forever. The breeze tangled Olivia's hair, but she didn't bother fixing it. Liam reached out absently, tucking a strand behind her ear with a tenderness that felt natural. They hadn't spoken about what came next. There was no plan, no timeline, just now. And strangely, that was enough. Until Olivia broke the silence. Don't want to go back to what I was, she said quietly, to who I was before this, before you. He nodded, setting his cup down. Me neither. She turned to him. But I'm not looking for something perfect. I'm tired of pretending. Things have to last forever to be worth something. Liam looked at her, really looked, and then answered slowly, what if it's not about lasting? What if it's about being present, showing up, fully, even if only for today? She exhaled, the words settling deep inside her like a truth she had always known but never dared to live. No promises, she said, no contracts, no fantasies, he added. Just this, she said, motioning between them. While it makes sense, Liam offered his hand, palm open. I can live with that. She took it, not with certainty, but with intention. That day they didn't post pictures or update their status. They didn't spend hours dissecting what they were or where they were going. They simply walked along the beach, ate from food trucks, read in silence under the shade of the same tree, watched the waves, and when the sun dipped low again, painting the water in amber and gold, Olivia turned to him and said, Thank you. For what? He asked, smiling gently. For not trying to be everything. For just being here. He nodded. That night they lay side by side again, not out of routine but by choice. The bed didn't feel like a place of confusion anymore. It felt like an agreement, a shared breath. And just before sleep claimed them, Olivia whispered, If tomorrow everything changes, I'll still be glad for this. Liam's voice came back, soft but certain. So will I. And in that moment, no future was promised, but the present, real, fragile, beautiful, was enough. It had been a year since Olivia first stepped into room 508, 12 months, 4 seasons, countless small moments that refused to fit neatly into any definition of love she had known before. She still lived in Seattle. Liam still lived in Los Angeles. They had never moved in together, never made grand declarations, never defined themselves as a couple in the way the world usually expected, and yet they were still choosing each other, every day. They texted often, called when it mattered. Sometimes went weeks with nothing but a photo, a shared song, a single line, thought of you today, And every summer they returned to Hana, to room 508. It had become their place, not a prison of memories but a lighthouse, a place untouched by routine, by obligation, a reminder of who they were when they stopped trying to be anything else. This time Olivia arrived first. She stepped into the room with a slow exhale, setting her bag down, letting the familiarity wash over her. The diffuser still released its faint sandalwood scent. The view of the ocean was still uninterrupted, but the room wasn't exactly the same because she wasn't. She had learned, over that year, that love didn't need permanence to be real. That absence didn't have to mean loss. That presence, intentional, sacred, honest, was sometimes more powerful than any title. When Liam arrived 2 hours later, he didn't knock. He opened the door gently, set his suitcase beside hers, and smiled. "You're early," she teased. "You're radiant," he said back, as if that explained everything. They didn't rush into each other's arms. They didn't fall onto the bed or speak in hurried sentences trying to catch up on time. They just stood there face to face, in the same room where everything had once begun by mistake. He reached for her hand. She took it, and together they walked to the balcony, where the ocean stretched endlessly before them. There were no promises, no plans to move in, no pressure to become someone else for the sake of the other. Just this. A choice renewed, not because it was easy, but because it was. Real. Some nights they stayed up late talking. Other nights they said almost nothing, letting the quiet say what words couldn't. They swam at sunrise, read side by side, shared long looks across dinner tables, and when the time came to part again, they didn't crumble, because they had built something not based on possession, but on freedom, a love that didn't bind, a love that didn't demand, a love that allowed. And as Olivia watched Liam drift off to sleep one night, his fingers barely brushing hers, she realized she wasn't waiting for a proposal or a label. She already had something far rarer, a man who met her where she was, no more, no less. And together they returned, again and again, not to escape life, but to remember how to live it. Not every love needs a name. Sometimes the deepest connections are the ones that don't fit into a box, where there are no shoulds, no forevers, no fairy tale endings. Just two people, choosing presence over perfection. Freedom over control, truth over expectation. Maybe love isn't about finding someone to complete your story. Maybe it's about finding someone who inspires you to write new chapters. So let me ask you, have you ever loved someone, even when there were no guarantees? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and let us know in the comments. Where are you listening from? Your like helps this channel grow and continue bringing emotional stories like this one. Share it with someone who needs to believe in love again.